It was great. So I'm going to start off today. If you know anything about me lately, you know that I, Craig, Smokey, we're all against what has been deemed by some as realignment pornography.
Correct.
Where people like wish cast things and say things, and this happens mostly on Twitter. If you don't know this, Twitter has an AI feature now called Grok. And if you're a paying subscriber, you can get it. Also, what Grok does, and if there's a headline that is frequent, it will take that headline and summarize it. For example, if you clicked on Republican National Convention, it would summarize fairly accurately what was going on in the convention. Mm-hmm. Donald Trump made a speech, Hulk Hogan was there, Kid Rock played, like those kind of a thing. Like that's what it would say, right? So for realignment, I sent Garrett this tweet this morning. And not the tweet, it was like the summary. So it said,
yes.
It had a Florida State and Clemson, like Big Ten and SEC not interested in Clemson and Florida State. I was like, well, I mean, that's kind of a headline from 5 days ago or so when Brett McMurphy released a story on Action Network. We had Brett on the show. And if you'll bear with me, I'm going to read you a paragraph. The first part of the paragraph until is true.
Yes.
And I will tell you, and look, I'm going to let people guess when I get to the untrue part.
Okay.
And the stupid part that has been made stupid by stupid people on the stupid internet. And this is a problem. And because, especially if you're a Big 12 fan watching the show, which many of you are, you're going to guffaw at this. Guffaw at this. I say guffaw, perhaps a chuckle, maybe even a scream. Mm-hmm. I don't know. FSU and Clemson are rumored to be considering leaving the Atlantic Coast Conference for the Big 12 amidst broader discussions about conference realignment in college sports. The potential move is driven by financial considerations, including revenue sharing and media rights. See, we're off to a good start. Yeah. Clearly the robot
he knew what he was doing there.
Understands. Okay, this is the information that's fed into the robot.
Correct.
The robot goes through millions of lines of code and does this. The potential move is driven by financial considerations, including revenue sharing and media rights, as well as the competitive positioning of schools and conferences. The SEC and Big Ten have shown little interest in adding ACC teams, including FSU and Clemson, due to financial and strategic reasons. The Big 12 is seen as a viable alternative, potentially offering a more competitive football environment and a proactive approach to expansion. The ACC, if FSU and Clemson leave, is speculated to target schools like West Virginia, UCF. It says Central Florida, by the way,
yes.
So they don't like that. West Virginia, UCF, Cincinnati, Kansas, Baylor, and TCU to maintain its competitiveness in basketball and football. So I will let you sleuths determine which sentence of that is patently stupid and false. And I will just preface it by saying, okay, look, if the FSU if Big 12 pulls off the immense boon of pulling in FSU and Clemson, and perhaps some other ACC teams, why would any of those teams in the Big 12 leave? Why could the ACC be like, oh yeah, you put one of ours in the hospital, we put one of yours in the morgue? That's not how this is going to work.
No, and I also think it would have made more sense. You could have made a reasonable argument if you would have listed two of those schools. Say you said West Virginia and Cincinnati, just because let's pretend geography matters in this scenario.
Yeah.
Let's just pretend that exists.
Yeah.
Then swapping 2 for 2, okay, it still doesn't make sense because you're not going to make the money. But what gets me is the notion that you're confident enough to put out there that Florida State and Clemson would leave to gain finances, but then rip away half of the schools in the division they would be going to flip-flop. It makes no sense. That's not real. That's not feasible. And that's not even close to even happening.
Yes. And so this is a robot that wrote this.
Yes.
But the robot writes this because of the information
nonsense
that is out there on of the food it's fed.
Yes.
So if you think of the robot like
it's an algorithm,
like an animal that's just eating everything you feed it, right? How many things can you just pour something in the bowl and then it's like a polar bear, just like boom, food, like just going through, and then it goes through all that. Well, it's going to eat whatever information it's fed. The thing about robots is they don't know, like they're not, there's a point where they can't differentiate between fact and fiction, which is why you don't see any like robot comedians or, things like that. It's just, there's no, they don't know that thing. So it's such a, like, it tells you the state of the realignment internet that would be out there for, and this is a thing that's going through thousands upon thousands upon thousands of tweets, pulling this information. So what does that mean? That means that enough of that information, that false, stupid, insane information is out there that the computer puts it up and says it's realistic speculation. Now, I realize that this is not a big, this is a drop in the bucket, but it's there to highlight the point of people will chase there's a group of people who will chase any realignment thread, no matter how nonsensical it is. And this is the most nonsensical thing I have heard in the last 3 years by a long shot.
My thing too is like on a bigger scale with, if you can get this type of information misconstrued on a topic that's really not that important, imagine what you could do in serious situations. And that's the fine line of walking where we're at right now. But it's crazy to me that people will go out of their way to just long for something that makes no sense just for the joy of it. Like, I don't understand the creating the fake accounts or just or trying to get after information that's not real, or trying to create these scenarios and fantasy book it, when you should just appreciate what we have and enjoy the football season. Like, the ACC is going to play football this year against each other. Let's focus on that. Let the lawsuits play out and then go from there after that. To me, all what we're doing right now is just wasting energy on wish casting, and people are constantly addicted to just wanting to be right or wanting to be in the middle of something. And you can throw so much stuff against the wall just because you're going to get clicks and attention. And I just think that's bad as a whole for where we're at right now.
Yeah. Grayson Ganoush, who doesn't like me anyway, he doesn't, says this guy's been on an emotional tirade since the Brett McMurphy article. No, I will say it again. I trust Brett. I trust that Florida State and Clemson may wind up in the Big 12. I have no idea. My point in all this is we are not even to the point of where there's realistic decisions to be made.
Right.
So anybody that says the Big 10's definitely not, the SEC definitely not, the Big 12 definitely is.
But they don't have to say anything.
But they're like, again, they don't have to say anything. Like, we're not at that point yet because there is a huge legal entanglement that these are dealing with. My tirade is against the lies and the ridiculous falsehoods being pushed out there. That's what muddles through this. Here is the reality of the situation. Florida State and Clemson, and potentially other ACC teams, but Florida State and Clemson are suing to get out of the ACC. They're not doing that to potentially get out. They're doing it to get out. They want to leave. One of them is very loud and obnoxious about it, Florida State. One of them is just there doing it. They're not
like Texas and Oklahoma.
Yeah, exactly. So one of them is out there loud and doing this, and the other one is following suit, just quieter. There are a million different rulings, and there's 4 cases going on right now. There's 2 in North Carolina. There's the ones in North Carolina with that are, filed by the ACC. There's one in South Carolina by Clemson. There's one in Florida by Florida State, and then there's the Florida Attorney General, who's nothing's going to come of that. That's just political hogwash and Look what I did. Yeah. I'm stepping up to the man.
Vote for me.
You know, that's what that is. But anybody who says they know for sure, and Brett McMurphy on this show will tell you he doesn't know for sure. He's just talked to a lot of people that said right now, this is why we wouldn't want them. Right now, in sports, what Jock Taylor's told me this a million times. What's true today is not necessarily true tomorrow. And what's true today is nobody knows how much Florida State and Clemson are going to have to pay out. Nobody knows when this is going to resolve. So no one can say, yes, we want them. Now, when they are out, I do think that discussion begins, and you'll know, truthfully, where everybody stands on it. Because, look, there's a scenario where the Big 12 can't add them because they're like, well, you know, we've got like they can't come to an agreement. Now, granted, if it's the last option for Clemson and Florida State, they're going to, take what they can get with the hope that the Big 12 TV deal would be up before the ACCs, and then we can talk again 6 years from, in 2031 or 2030 when they're negotiating this again.
Another thing that's bothered me with this, or that I've struggled to comprehend, is right now the way things are set up in the ACC going forward for this foreseeable future. Programs like Clemson, Florida State will have the opportunity to benefit off of making more money based on their play on the field, correct?
Yeah.
So why, if you have that system put in place, you already know you're like the face of the football when it comes to those two programs in particular, and you can Miami's hoping to get back up there, North Carolina, yada, yada. But year in and year out, it's more likely going to be Florida State and Clemson that are going to get extra revenue off the top because of their play, their ability to position themselves in position to get in the college football playoff, conference title games, and et cetera. Why would you leave that behind to come to a conference in the Big 12 where that's not going to be an option on the table and you're going to get paid less money in the first place? I don't get that part of it.
No, look, I think Clemson and Florida State to the Big 12 is the last option.
The very last option.
It's the last option for them. But it is an option.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of our viewers think that I'm mad about that. I will state, I don't care where they end up, even if they end up back in the ACC, as long as the end of the season ends in mostly playoff runs and they win a couple titles now and then.
Right.
They have won on average since 1993, one every 8 years.
Not bad.
Not bad.
Not bad.
I would like one every 4, like a presidential cycle. But I'll take one every 8.
Yeah.
Most people don't get that. Most people have never even gotten one. So I'm not getting greedy, but that's what I want. That's my realistic view for what my team is capable of. I think that should be most people's realistic view of long-term success in a program.
Absolutely.
I want you to be in the postseason, being good most of the time, but not but I don't there's too impossible to win every single year.
But you definitely need to be making the playoff now.
Yeah, you need to be making the playoff or getting close. If you're not in the playoff, if you're not in the top 12, I want you to be in the top 16.
Correct.
I want you to have just missed
the outside. Yeah.
Missed it. That's what I think. That's what I want. And that can't be every year. Some years you're gonna be 25th. In the way that we don't even know the way that this is gonna work long term.
Yeah, I'm
to where
the
roster flows in the
yeah.
So that's where I want. So I just wanted to address that because I thought it was weird when I thought about it. But if you're in the top 16, to me at the end of the year, it means your team is close to the playoff or in the playoff. And if you're doing that regularly, and then you're, 1 year you're 16, 1 year you're 4th, 1 year you're 9th, 1 year you're that will over time be fine. Just missed it this year. Okay. No reason to chase the coach out or anything like that. Also, I do think the playoff will help coaches going forward because it's a more reliable metric of how close you are.
Yeah.
As opposed to you're not in the top 4, you've been to 5 bowl games in a row, but you haven't been to these 5 bowl games,
I also think it has potential to help the teams who are on that 15 to 20 window because you could see how close you are to getting in. And then I think that would help you be able to identify what you need to get out of the portal. And I think it would help adjust your roster to make a push the next year into the playoffs easier than – I think you'll have a better way to balance what you need compared to just kind of going off of not knowing to be – does that make any sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right, let's get to some of the other headlines today. The ACC Media Days are next week. Mm-hmm. And this is from David Hale, who writes for ESPN. We've had him on the show. Very, very good writer. Actually, one of my favorite writers. He's very, very funny. Very, very funny. So he says here, fun fact, at next week's ACC kickoff, the league will feature 7 QBs from Texas high school: Ward, Rogers, Klubnik, Stone, Yarnell, Drones, and King, and 3 more who transfer from Texas colleges: Murphy, Shuck, and Johnson, and of course SMU, legendary ACC team from Texas. But this is, there's talk of this at SEC Media Days. Mm-hmm. There was talk of it at Big 12 Media Days. People asked, why are there so many good quarterbacks in Texas? And there are better quarterbacks in Texas. There are better linemen in like Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia and Florida. There's better skill players. Skill players are kind of
all over.
All over.
Yeah.
But like if you take that Southeast, like Tennessee's got more. Like that's the thing. We're going to talk about Memphis at the end of the show. That's one of the reasons I think, that and the FedEx money. Yeah. If Memphis can get some kids to stay home, like they could be really, really interesting to watch in the G5 because there's a ton of talent there. But Texas has the best high school football culture in the country. Mm-hmm. It's not even close. It's not even close. There are individual places, like schools in other states that care. Mm-hmm. Maybe individual districts or parishes if you're in Louisiana.
Right, yeah.
But individual places like that.
Like Hoover, Alabama.
Yes, Hoover, Alabama, or what's the one in Ohio that's so famous?
Oh my God. I'm drawing a blank on it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Modern day in California.
Bishop
Gorman. Like those are individual. Most of the schools in Texas that have the means are all Hoover and Bishop Gorman and modern day and, I'm trying like Jacksonville.
Sycamore.
Yeah. Jacksonville Bowls in Florida is just
Evangel.
Shreveport Evangel.
Curtis.
St. Thomas Aquinas in Fort Lauderdale, right? Like those places put a lot of effort into their high school, generally athletics and period. Most of them are good at every single thing. In Texas, as long as you're spending a lot of money in football, sometimes it spills over to other sports, and that's fine. But really, it's football and then everything else right there. And you just look, you drive around this town. We have 2 major and school stadiums right here in Waco ISD and Midway. They're beautiful, major, like you would think a junior college place there. And then honestly, like UMHB Stadium in Belton.
Go to UMHB.
And that's where a lot of the Belton schools will play now because there's 3 of them, or 2 of them. And then but Temple High School is older, but it's still a beautiful, huge stadium. And then you look at some of the smaller ones. Robinson's got a very nice stadium. China Spring has a very nice stadium for smaller schools.
China Spring's got like the light shows and stuff now.
Mart is a 2A school, a very like tiny, like Mart, like you can be through Mart in 3 minutes.
Yep.
I mean, it's not like if you didn't know you were in Mart, you would you've got 3 minutes to figure it out because it's gone. It's really small, and they're a juggernaut. Their field very nice. Like they spent a lot of money on it. I think that's why the quarterback culture is so much better in Texas than everywhere else because they build everything up, and then of course it's built around the quarterback. So you have guys that are probably more ready to play the most important position than other places. And look, you got kids, you got weight rooms, protein shakes, all these things that. You've got some of the best athletes in the country coming out of places like Belglade, Florida, and, like inner city Los Angeles and Miami that if they get a protein shake, it's because their coach brought it to them and was like, here, have this. But it's not like something every day where they have a nutritionist or a strength coach. It's like, all right, we have a bunch of free protein shakes here. Make sure you have one of those on your way to class today. They have that. The 6A, 5A schools in particular have that in numbers all over Texas. And looking at these quarterbacks, Haynes King went to a gigantic
Longview.
school. Drones went to a huge school.
Shadow Creek.
Klubnik went to a huge school.
Austin Wesley,
Preston Stone did.
The Highland Park, yeah.
Yeah. So so those that they went to schools where they didn't want for anything. If a weight machine broke in my high school or in your high school,
we didn't even have them.
Okay, yeah,
we were
you're in
dirt
Ogilvy,
poor.
and you're in Texas, but you're a 6-man. But in my high school, which didn't want for money, but if a weight machine broke, it was 3 months before it got fixed. It was the requisition and everything. If a weight machine breaks in the midway locker room,
it's fixed the next day.
I mean, if it's not, it's just because the guy had another weight machine to go fix somewhere else. It just fixed the next day. They don't have to worry about anything.
I also think it helps to and I know other states have this, but just the mass amount of former players who were stars at the position, who went on to have success at college. Some had short stints in the NFL, but they come back and they invest their time into helping the kids, whether it's working off the field. They go back and be like Riley Dodge. You go back and become a coach, and you become the next quarterback whisperer like your dad was to you. You pass it on to Quinn Ewers or whoever else, and I think there's just so much of that. The evolution and the time invested into 7-on-7. I know it's a nationwide thing, but
Texas
the
is
way
on the
it's
forefront.
ran here, it's totally different.
Yeah, Texas is on the forefront, and then they changed.
Unreal.
They changed the rule. It used to be the high school coaches weren't involved, but they were kind of
God.
involved. And then they finally it's probably better if you let them do it because it's a summer activity. So it keeps somewhat the vultures at bay, but you can't always do that. But 7-on-7 is huge, which makes the quarterbacks better in the modern offenses, all of that. And just the coaching culture is better in Texas because coaches are more comfortable financially. They're more comfortable. Yeah. Most other places, your head coach also teaches history or algebra or whatever, or he's PE, he's got to teach classes. That's true probably up to half of the 3A schools in Texas. And then once you're 4A and above, unless the coach really wants to teach a history class, he ain't gonna.
Well, that and another thing, I think the only real difference where in Texas you're kind of on the same playing field with those scenarios is in the private schools, where you could have, I believe your head coach can be an employee of the school and get paid, but all your assistants, they can't be paid. But the thing here is, you'll see a lot of players, ex-players from Baylor or just in general, they'll come back, they'll volunteer. And they bring that expertise into it. And that's something I don't think you get a lot of other places too, but that's really the only place where you can kind of say there's a similarity in Texas high schools compared to others, but that you have to go to the private school sector.
But also, even the assistant coaches that teach, their schedule is not
it's not full blown all day.
It's not like Mrs. Davis's Spanish class, she's got they've got more flexibility in the schedule because the UIL, the way that the Texas high school coaches, the way that has been built around making sure that, these guys can focus on that a little bit more. And there are some, and I'm not saying they're not good teachers. Most of them are fantastic teachers, but most of the head coaches, they're the head football coach / athletic director, or if it's a big enough school district, they're just the head football coach / head football coach / head football coach. But that's all they have to worry about. And so when you have that kind of freedom that other people don't, I think the quarterbacks are what you'll see first, is because you've got a head coach who can spend a lot of time and they can do all these things, and they're much more involved. So I think it's very interesting, how, quarterbacks all over, they're getting, and they're recruiting quarterbacks all over. And I'm sure, and the other thing is there's only so many schools in Texas too, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So you can't, Haynes King was at a school in Texas too. He fits both. Texas high school, transfer from a Texas school, but yeah.
So I also think too, in Texas, the proximity, especially if you're a kid who lives on the 35 corridor between one of the major cities here, the amount of exposure at camps you have access, like high quality camps. So you can go, if I'm a kid that lives in Waco, I could easily hit A&M, Texas, SMU, TCU, Baylor's, all that. I can hit that in like 2 weeks. I can, in the amount of competition I'm getting. Whereas if I'm a kid in Ohio, like, I can hit Ohio State. So then I'm going to have to go over to Michigan and come down somewhere. It's just easier to get to the competition and the amount of infrastructure into it. It's so easy to get.
Look, you could be a top recruit. Like now that you can go to all the stuff that you want to, you could be a top recruit from Montana.
Yeah.
And tell your family to come down. Like all the schools in Texas are recruiting you. You could spend 2 weeks here and hit 10,
and hit like 5 of them.
Well, you probably hit 10.
Yeah.
Like honestly, like if it's two-day camps,
if you do it
you're
right,
just like, okay, well, and believe me, a lot of them are staggered for this very reason.
Exactly, they are.
Like if you were TCU and found out that Baylor's camp was the same day you were, you'd probably like, we're going to move ours, like theirs is Thursday, Friday, ours is Tuesday, Wednesday now. Like that's what you're going to do. They're all very aware. It's not that. All right, last thing.